From the Virginia Audio Collective at WTJU 91.1 FM and Brown College at the University of Virginia, this is Symposia. Welcome to Symposia. My name is Sage Tangway. Today's episode is a little bit different because we are going to be talking about Brown Residential College itself. Instead of one key guest, we actually have recordings from several Brown and Monroe Hill alumni who wanted to share a little bit about their time in this very special dorm. Now, full disclosure, I myself lived in Brown for all 4 years of my time at UVA, 2012 through 2016. And as such, I know a large portion of the people you're about to hear from. I guess a familiar name on such an emailed request makes people much more likely to reply. But if you're an alum listening out there and feel inspired to reach out with your own story, please know that submissions are always welcome, and even if it doesn't end up on an episode, your words will make it to current residents. You can email symposia@virginia.edu anytime. If this is your first year living in Brown, welcome! I'm sure the last several weeks have been full of so many exciting things, and if my experience is anything to go off of, that'll just continue. Finally, to returning residents, you're probably already convinced that Brown Residential College is a pretty groovy place to be. But I think it's still powerful to hear from people who have long since graduated. For all of our speakers, this living and learning community stands out in their memories and in their current lives. We'll work our way forward in time, beginning with a story of faculty-student connection.
I would be remiss if I did not include a shout out to a person who, for me, was an ever-present force at Brown College and has made an indelible impact in my life. My name is David Scott McDougall, and I'm recording this from my home in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. I resided in Brown College all 4 years of undergrad, from 1999 until 2003, when I graduated from the Political and Social Thought program. I was honored to have received the Brown College Spirit of the Hill Award for intangible services rendered to my beloved dorm. In truth, I'm really not exactly sure what the qualifications were for this honor, but some of my closest friends also received the same recognition. We were given a plaque at a banquet, and for a while, every year or two, we would mail those plaques to each other as a way of staying in touch and maintaining our friendships that still very much exist to this day. I have no idea where that plaque is now, but it's probably tucked away in the basement of a family member on the East Coast. The Spirit of the Hill Award was presented to me by the president of Brown College and the previous director of studies, Professor Carl Trindle. He was a fixture of the chemistry department, where I most assuredly never set foot. Now, the remarkable thing about Mr. Trindle, reflecting on it over 20 years since I graduated, is just what an incredible force he played, not only in my educational experience at Brown, but by inspiring and supporting me in my nascent work as a filmmaker. I still remember him there right from the start of my time at Brown, when he co-led a required seminar for first-year Brownies and showed us, and I'm sure they're still there, those pencil-marked signatures from generations of previous students right outside the Sally Brown reading room. Mr. Trindle was there when I slowly found my voice and learned to assert myself as a membership co-chair on the governing board. He was part also, if I recall correctly, of the selections committee that approved my candidacy as a resident coordinator. And he then disapproved, or he was part of the team that disapproved my bid to become the head RC, which could have been for good reason. We won't really know. He also started a film screening group that met in his residence at the Monroe Hill House. Now, this was a tiny group, and at times it was just me and him watching classic music docs like the Maisleys Brothers' Give Me Shelter or D.A. Pennebaker's Don't Look Back. He was right there at the very start of my film career. While still in Charlottesville after graduating, waiting for my Peace Corps application to process, Mr. Trindle invited, or allowed, I forget exactly which, but he allowed me to screen my first film ever at the Hill House. This was a trailer for a feature film that I still have not yet written, and I don't think it was very good. Over a decade later, I would be officially invited back to speak to Brown undergrads by Mr. Trindle and the secretary on the Hill, our beloved Chris Ostelkanis. While there, I also screened my latest short film. So it was a homecoming I'm not sure I deserved, but it was a memory that I'll treasure for my life, and it helped me feel proud of my filmic journey and put wind in my sails for what has always been quite an arduous career. I've now been working hell or high water as a documentary and narrative filmmaker for nearly 20 years, and continue to aspire to make my first feature. Next year, I think, will be the year. The most remarkable thing about all of this is that Mr. Carl Trindle is still ever present in my life. Back in 2018, we reconnected over Facebook, having both expressed some degree of regret at never having read James Joyce's Ulysses. Mr. Trindle and I have formed a book club of two, never discussing any of it in person or over the phone, but rather regularly and intermittently sending each other mini book reports with our takeaways, gripes, and deep thoughts. Since James Joyce, we've covered Cormac McCarthy, Homer, Aristotle, David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, Ishiguro, Alan Watts, Joseph Heller, Neil Gaiman's Sandman graphic novel, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and probably many more. It's always a remarkable thing when a college professor makes some clear and tangible contribution to the development of a student's career or education or character. But Mr. Trindle, as I always called him back then in undergrad, has always been there, right in the background of my life, never pushing, but always supporting my film career, igniting my love of reading, and leading me to find my own inspiration countless times. So, I suppose I'm recording this to say thank you, Carl. Your presence in my life has meant more to me than I could ever have realized at any one moment, because it has continued to span the entirety of my adult life. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has received the incredible gift of your time and energy, but at this point, I can tell you that knowing you has truly been a singular experience. Thank you. So, I suppose for the undergrads who are listening to this podcast right now, in times when relationships and content seems to be ever more ephemeral, sometimes you'll be lucky enough to encounter someone who, for whatever reason, is up for playing the long game. And it's not something you can really anticipate, but sometimes someone will surprise you, and you'll one day discover that your relationship has already stood the test of time. Right now, we've just wrapped up the Inferno together, and Carl is continuing on in Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy into Purgatory, and will be soon reporting back if the juice is worth the squeeze. I'm looking forward to that email. Thanks.
My name's Brad Green. I lived in Brown College on Monroe Hill between 2008 and 2012. And I think one of the most important things for me was having a kind of ready-made community coming as an out-of-state student. And as a first year, it was really nice to have folks with similar interests, as well as engaging and outgoing, interesting folks to live with and grow beside. And that's something that I would really recommend for students to try for at least a year, go through the application process. And I definitely still have friendships from those years over a decade ago that feel fresh as ever in many cases. And I can't imagine my UVA experience without that.
So my name is Sasan Musavi. I was a Brown College resident for only 1 year, from 2013 to 2014. I had applied to live in Brown actually the year before as a transfer student and didn't get in, but I happened to be in a lot of the same clubs and organizations that had Brown College residents, and I think it just made more sense the more time passed to apply again, and thankfully I got in during my 4th year at UVA. And overall, it was an important enough experience for me while I was a university student to where I still keep in touch with people that I met there, that I lived with there, and people that I would definitely still consider friends. I think coming into UVA as a transfer student meant that I had to work a little bit harder to find my tribe, so to speak. I only knew 1 or 2 people coming from community college, and it made, I think, the transition to a 4-year university really tricky at first, where you had a lot of people who had the quintessential first-year experience or who were already established, well-known within their clubs. And when you're coming into that as a 3rd-year student, it means that you don't really feel comfortable having a place at the table. You kind of have to prove yourself in a way. And at Brown, it wasn't like that at all, and I think that's what I really appreciated about my time there the most. I think, if I remember correctly, the application said at the time that I sent mine that Brown is for the interesting and the interested. And I think that definitely held true when I was there. Maybe it still holds true today, 10 years or so later. What I appreciated about it the most was that it's really a place that allows you to celebrate your eccentricities rather than hiding them or trying to keep them under wraps because you're afraid of how people are going to respond to them. I think it makes you feel comfortable if you're still trying to figure out who you really are and what you're really interested in. It allows you, I think, to explore your own identity in a lot of different ways, not just by virtue of being surrounded by a lot of interesting people from different backgrounds, of course, but by the opportunities you have to explore, your own interests, right? In terms of the events that are put on, in terms of being able to, for example, invite speakers to give guest talks, being able to do impromptu movie sessions, doing Rave in the Cave as well, which was probably my favorite experience there, being able to just randomly host a flash mob rave in the study area because it's just what we could do. We had the opportunity to do that and no one was really going to stop us. So it's really a place that for anybody who's not afraid to show who they are, to show their eccentricities, to showcase the more interesting parts of their personality. It's a perfect place for that. But I think if you're also looking for a university experience where you're open to change, you're open to questioning yourself, you're open to finding out more about things you didn't know about before, then it's the perfect place for that as well. I was lucky enough to have other great communities and clubs I was a part of at UVA, but I think Brown was the perfect place for me to really be okay with myself and be okay with how weird I was. And even to this day, it's something that I celebrate, and I hope that everyone else is able to do that.
My name is Scott LeBeau. I lived in Brown from fall of 2012 to May of 2016. Living in Brown College was one of the best decisions I've made. It allowed me to join a community which I still rely on now. College wasn't the easiest time for me, and I didn't feel prepared to meet academic expectations. What kept me going and allowed me to thrive was the friends I made in Brown. It was impossible for me to feel alone, impossible for me to feel isolated, and impossible for me to have an issue without another Brown resident ready to help. I wouldn't recommend living to Brown to everybody, but for me, I truly don't think I would have graduated without a community around me, and Brown was that community.
Hello, this is Sandal Gunnan. I lived in Brown 2014, 15, 16, and 17. My favorite memories are hanging out in the lounges with many people and watching something usually that I've never heard of, and the really great community we had. I still keep in touch with my friends from Brown a decade later, and they are my closest friends. Living in Brown was by far my best choice at UVA. Brown helped me make many friends at UVA that were extremely diverse. I made friends of every ethnicity, major, and background with very different ways of thinking. If I hadn't lived in Brown, they would probably all be in my major, which was 90% the same ethnicity, have similar backgrounds, and similar ways of thinking. I think the people in Brown and events we held were very unique. My experience at UVA would be so different without Brown. I would have had a lot less friends that weren't as close or diverse, and not be in another community that was as great as Brown. I would highly recommend Brown to future students. The community and diversity is unparalleled, and my experience at UVA wouldn't be the same without it.
My name is Mariah Huffman, and I lived at Brown College from my first year at UVA in 2013 until my last year of undergrad at UVA in 2016. Living in Brown College completely defined my UVA experience in the best ways possible. I still remember when I was a first year, I was so nervous my first week of school. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I didn't know anybody at UVA. But I had found out about Brown College online when I was a senior in high school, and I was just so enchanted with everything I learned about it. And I'm so glad that I got in and got the chance to live there as a first year, because my very first weekend of college, I made close friends who I am still very close with to this day. I just flew 3,000 miles across the country for a birthday party last year for someone I met in Brown my first year, and I live just a couple of miles down the street from another really close friend who just helped me move into my first house last weekend. I would not be where I am today without my experience in Brown. Getting the chance to learn from students in the years above me and the resident professors and just all of the faculty partners that Brown worked with throughout the years really helped me find my way in school, and it also helped me land jobs that helped put me through school. And I don't know if I would have made it through my undergrad time at UVA without the people I met and the opportunities I had the privilege to work on as a resident of Brown. I am just extremely grateful for the years that I got to spend in Brown, and I like to think that I made a lot of friendships in my time there that are going to last me a lifetime.
Hi, I'm Marley McGraw. I lived at Brown for all 4 years of college from 2017 to 2021, and I was really excited when I saw this email pop up because I love talking about Brown. Living in Brown was definitely the best part of my time at UVA. I think that as a bright-eyed first year coming into a space full of people who were really excited to welcome me home was just such a welcoming and affirmative place to enter into, such a caring place to enter into. And the people just rock. I'm still friends with most of my first year roommates. I met so many beautiful and interesting people who had such a range of experiences, who had different majors, who had different hobbies. And I think that the community and learning to live in community with 300 people is such a rare experience, and also has been so foundational to how I think about the world. when I think of UVA's kind of like core value of like student self-governance, right? I think that Brown is the first place that I think of as like the example that I think of, because like our shared purpose is living together, and we all pay into a fund and we can use that to do what we as a community think will be valuable to us. That gives us so much latitude to bring the things that we think keep our community thriving to the table, and that can be different things for so many different people. And I saw the ways that like that structure made room for different people to bring their values to the table and to like organize and run events that were meaningful to like individual people and to watch that become meaningful to others. Like I was a sustainability co-chair and I was doing environmental engineering as a major, so like this was something that matters deeply to me. I ran our compost program for 2-3 years, and like I watched the way that people became invested in it because I brought my enthusiasm to it, and because people were interested in like supporting and fostering that enthusiasm. And it was so cool to see the different ways that people were able to bring what they loved to Brown, and Brown could like support and uplift and gather around those things. That skill of community living, of living together, really helped us during the pandemic, for example, because that hit 2020 in my third year. We spent a lot of time like being intentional about that, keeping everybody fed. We'd like use the funds that we had to make sure that like we were distributing food in a way that was COVID conscious and safe, but also like accessible for people. We took the time that we had to build like a free textbook library so that both people in our time, but mostly people who came after us, would have access to textbooks that can be really expensive. Everybody brings a lot of interest in keeping the community thriving, and I loved that so much. I loved living in Brown. I miss living in Brown. I doubt I'll ever get to have an experience quite like that again. This is me as an alum sending just so much love to all of you current residents. I hope that Brown is treating you so well. This alum over here is always happy to support y'all in ways that I can. And I still check BC Chat. I didn't even get into BC Chat.
Special thanks to the alumni who made this episode possible. Again, submissions are always welcome at symposia@virginia.edu. The music for this episode was provided by Blue Dot Sessions. Symposia is a production of the Brown College Community Media Initiative and the Virginia Audio Collective at WTJU 91.1 FM.